Welcome to another episode of Swing Thoughts. Very excited about this one. Of course, I'm golf spiritual leader, along with my very dear friend, Coach Timothy Aloysius O'Connor. I'm not sure that's your middle name. Do I know your middle name?
Joseph.
Joseph.
Yeah, it's Timothy Joseph O'Connor. It's a Russian name.
Is it now?
Yes.
That's great. Well, it's always a pleasure to have everyone with us, and very excited about this show, even though our guest today is somebody that we know very, very well and has probably set the Swing Thoughts record for most appearances, but we'll get to that in a second. This show is brought to you, as always, by TaylorMade QI 4D drivers. They're fastest, most fittable drivers. It's time to find your new fast. And I guess by way of introduction, I wanted to read. I didn't tell you about this, Tim, because I thought I'd surprise you. Before we get to that, Tim, why don't you tell everyone, if you can, that this podcast, once again, not to be too braggadocious.
We're going to brag. We are going to brag.
We're very, very humble on this program. We're at the service of others. But Tim and I have gotten some great news. Tim?
Yes. Well, we have been awarded for the second year in a row 2 top 3 finishes in the Golf Journalists Association of Canada Media Contest.
There you go.
In the multimedia.
I'll tell you what surprised me most about what you just said, that I had no idea we were journalists. I just thought we were nincompoops doing this podcast for 11 years.
Yeah. Yeah, so we won first place and third place. And it's pretty cool. So we've won 4 awards in that contest in the last 2 years. So we're trending.
Wait, it is a great trend. And by way of introduction, I got an email from one of the Humble and Fred listeners who, it's interesting because I've seen this person's name a couple of times emailing the show. Sharon Atkins says, "Hi, guys. Congratulations to Howard and Tim on the awards bestowed," because I'd mentioned it on the show the other day. The awards bestowed on the Swing Thoughts recently. This is interesting. I discovered Swing Thoughts by accident while listening to the Mind Caddie. Karl Morris mentioned Swing Thoughts, so I had to listen. And I was like, the whole, synchronicity, the whole circle of life. And I just loved it. And so here is the man that recommended our podcast to at least one other person. He's one of our favorite guests. He's a mental performance coach. He's been doing this for a very long time. His latest book is called The Mind Caddie. And we're always happy to have him back, Dr. Karl Morris. Hello, sir.
Hello, Howard. Hello, Tim. I'm very jealous there with those 4 awards. You've got 4 more awards than I've got for my show, which is great to hear. But yeah, it's interesting what you said about middle names. That my actual middle name is Karl. Official title is Robert Karl Morris. So the only time I get called Robert is when I've got a medical appointment, and I think who the hell's Robert Morris?
I thought you got called that when you're in trouble with your mother.
No,
that's right. Yeah, your full name. Yeah, I think title. We all went through that as kids whenever our mother used our full name. I was going to say our Christian name, but not in my case. I just want to get right to this because I've been listening to a lot of Karl Morris lately. One of my favorite podcasts to listen to is The Mind Caddie, and Karl's had a bunch of great guests. Karl, I've been listening to the episode with Sasha was great. I forgot the name of the guy who does the Zen putting guy was amazing.
Will Stubbs, yeah.
A fantastic episode. The Don Christensen episode, we booked him for our show as well. But I think you've really, whether you've won awards or not, I think the show has really hit its stride. You have such a great way of teasing out information from people. And I've been on a couple of road trips for golf tournaments, and I've just really enjoyed it. As well, Karl, I think I sent you a note that I've been having a lot of conversations with you. Virtual conversations. For the longest time, Karl gifted the Mind Caddie app to Tim and I. And I got to be honest, I don't think I had ever really explored it much. But recently I had occasion to have several conversations with a virtual Carl. And before I read you what I have here, why don't you explain to people a little bit about the app, and we'll get to the book in a second, but also and how people can have a conversation with you.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, the app's been around for a while, Howard, but Ben, the designer of it all, it came to me a couple of years ago, and he said, "I think we can start doing AI on the app." And he said, "We'll eventually be able to have a conversation with you virtually." And I thought, well, what's this all about? Because technology wise, I'm 36 handicap plus. I mean, you know, I'd still write letters if I could. But ultimately, the app has got a bunch of ideas in there and courses that you can do, and you know, specific parts of the game, how to train better and stuff like that. But the latest thing is this AI version where Ben's pretty much fed in every utterance I've ever made on podcasts and CD programs in the past and mind certification, all the rest of it. Everything's been fed in that I've ever said, and now there's the opportunity. You can literally, as you said, Howard, you can sit down and have a conversation in real time with me, and I think what's hopefully interesting about it is that it actually prompts you by, you ask it something and then it'll ask you another question, so you can actually, it's not just the sort of copy and paste sort of stuff. It does dig a little bit deeper and find out what your own issues are and whatever you want to work on.
Tim, if you'll indulge me, one more question. I actually fed a question into AI Carl this morning. I said, I'm about to interview Karl Morris. What is something you've always wanted to ask him? I just did it kind of as a bit, but it comes back. This is what it came back with, Tim. AI Carl said, that's an interesting question. If I had the opportunity to speak with Karl Morris directly, I would ask him this. Karl, given your extensive experience working with top professionals and your belief that golf is played by a human being, not a machine, what is the single most profound shift in a player's thinking that you've witnessed that led to a genuine breakthrough in their performance beyond just a temporary improvement? I thought it was a great question. So
oh my God, AI, it's just so much smarter than me. I'm so intimidated.
No, so, but I thought, I didn't know what it was going to come back with, because I'm telling you, Karl, I've done a lot of this AI Karl stuff. So I'd be curious, what is the single most profound shift that you've witnessed?
I was just thinking that as you're going through that, it would probably be better having AI Carl on the podcast rather than me. It probably come with far more profound answers.
I think your wife likes AI Carl better than you.
Well, she said it's far, far better because at least AI Carl actually asks a question rather than just gives a statement.
That's very good.
What would be the most profound thing? I think I won't name the guy, but guy's been pretty successful. He really got the idea a couple of years ago of getting away from a word that I think terrorizes all of us as golfers. I call it worshipping at the altar of consistency. That every golfer will go for a golf lesson and say, I want to be more consistent. Every pro, most of the articles say, read this article and you're going to be more consistent. And what's everybody's subjective experience of the game of golf is anything but that. I mean, even the best players in the world. I remember having a conversation with a guy years ago. He was one of the best players of the last 25, 30 years. And I said to him how often, he was world number 2 at the time. And I said, how often do you feel like you've actually got your game? And he said about 12 times a year. And I said, what do you mean 12 tournaments a year? He said, no, 12 rounds a year. And this was a top player. He said most of the rest of the time, it's B, C, D game, and you're kind of working with that and trying to find a way of getting it round. And I think the big challenge for everybody, and I think it applies even at medium high handicaps, is getting to a point where you can make peace with this actual reality of the game, where it's going to always be inconsistent, it's always going to be variable, there's an element of chaos about it. But the big paradox, I think, kicks in, Howard, with it, is that the more you can become at peace with it, the more it tends to settle down. And actually, you do become a little bit more consistent through the back door of resisting the idea of consistency. I know that's like a Zen koan in a way, but I think the more we can become at peace with, every day feels a slightly different, we are different, yesterday we ate something, yesterday we slept in a certain way. And I think to the question you asked, what the thing that made a big breakthrough for this guy in question was he's going to the golf course and each day just asking himself the question, what have I got today? Rather than going to the golf course hoping that he had what he had yesterday or hoping that he's not got what he had yesterday. Just asking that question, what have I got today? Hitting some shots, warming up, noticing patterns, noticing shape, noticing contact, things like that. And then going out on the golf course and being prepared to deal with that. And I think there's a real sort of human element to it where we love the idea of life being predictable, and we love the idea of certainty, and we love the idea of, and I don't know whether you have a program over there in Canada. We call it the Dragon's Den here in the
it's
UK.
very simple. Yeah, it's called the Dragon's Den here too.
Is it the Dragon's Den? Yeah, and it always makes me smile when you've got these guys on there, and these guys have made loads of money, and they'll have somebody trying to pitch their idea, and they'll say, what's your projection for year 4 and 5? And I'm thinking, what the fuck? You've no idea what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone in 5 years' time. And I know there's an element you've got to do that in business, but I think the more we can make peace with chaos and uncertainty, the more life becomes manageable.
Love that. Love that. And I'm going to use that story as a bridge into getting into your book, The Mind Caddie. And one of the things I found really interesting that connects with what you just talked about was you got your start, shall we say, in the business of helping golfers, giving golf lessons. And what you found, the key thing you found was that what people tried to do, what they hoped would work on the driving range didn't translate into the golf course. So to me, that's just such it's a paradigm shift of a belief system that most golfers really struggle with. So why don't you just talk about a little bit about how that idea of if I get a perfect swing or I find the move that works on Friday, Saturday, I'm going to be a tour pro, but it never works.
Yeah. I think a lot of that started, Tim, really. It was a conversation that I had with, and how many minutes are we into the podcast? And I'll mention his name for the first time, Fred Shoemaker. We've probably not got into double figures.
Taking my Fred Shoemaker drink.
Everyone take a drink, Fred Shoemaker time. No.
And Fred hit me right between the eyes, because I'd gone from trying to play spectacularly unsuccessfully to then coaching, and was coaching a lot of players. And I remember Fred saying to me, he said, are you passing on to other people what didn't work for you?
That's a great phrase.
And it just like knocked me over. It knocked me over to such a degree. I actually left golf for a couple of years. I went away from the game completely because I just thought that's exactly what I'm doing. I got tied in knots with all the technical stuff. I was a reasonable player as a kid. I actually shot level par within the first 18 months of playing golf and never had a golf lesson. And then a guy said to me after I'd done that, he said, do you know what? He said, you should take this game seriously. If you have some lessons, you could be really good. And it was kind of like downhill for the next 30 years after that.
Like shooting level par. Hey, even par is good, but if you wanted to be really good, you should do something with your grip.
And then I was out there with friends, and I realized it's exactly what I was doing, because positions in the swing, analysis and all the rest, it's tangible, and it still is tangible, and it's kind of what people expect from a golf lesson. And you guys both know me. I've never ever said that technique isn't important. I've never ever said that impact conditions aren't important. But why do we still labor under the illusion that what I do on the range, thinking about positions, is going to transfer onto the golf course, when most people's experience is that doesn't happen? So, it's this two hats theory of, you wear one hat to develop your skills on the range or indoors or whatever, and then you wear a different hat on the golf course to actually access those skills. And that hat needs to be different, to actually access your skills on the golf course. Then, to me, there needs to be a different focus of attention. Mm-hmm. There needs to be a different understanding of the reality of the game. There needs to be an adaptability at play. But ultimately, I think the last few years, I've got clearer that when you can go and play golf, and you're out there on the golf course and the shot is creating the swing, then I think you're in the right place. I mean, it's funny, I was up at the Scottish Open at the beginning of this week at the Renaissance Club, and obviously all great players up there, but this one guy working with in particular, he's a really, really top player. And by his own admission can go down the technical route. And he said, I love, it was a great thing he came up with. He said, I love playing links golf. He said, because I have to think about the shots.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, a lot of the time we're just playing on tour and it's just like a dartboard situation. And it's so easy when the course appears simple. I'm quoting up in the air with simple, that you just fall into the trap of, if I do this and I do that, I'll actually hit good shots. But, you know, for everybody, you guys are, good players, and there's an inherent joy when you create a shot in your mind and your body responds to that map and produces that shot, and you tap into the genius of the body.
There's so much in that, and it kind of harkens back to the Sasho McKenzie episode that you recorded recently. And I'm going to try and tie it all in because, you and I spoke last fall, and I gave heads up putting a try, and I still use it in my practice. I use it in my warm up for sure, just to get a feel for the land and to be externally focused. But part of in the Mind Caddie book, which is, by the way, we should talk about a little bit before we finish with Karl today. What it is, it's kind of a compendium of all Karl's experience and learning over the last 30 years, and we'll definitely highlight some of it. But in the book, and again, it ties into what you and Sasha were talking about, being externally focused on out there as a putting regimen versus block practice and gates and all these things and all the gadgets. But in the book, you say, with external focus, you're broadly limited. I love this sentence. With external focus, the opposite of that, you're broadly limited to the club, the ball, or the target. Much simpler, much clearer. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
I think, if you look at the academic research, and Sasho's a great example of somebody steeped in science who's researched this to the nth degree, that external focus seems to be, and I say seems to be, for most people, a better area to place your attention when you want to perform, when you want to actually access your skills on the golf course. I think when we go internal, which again, there's a time and a place for that. If you've got really inefficient movement patterns, there's a time to work on that, where you perhaps do need to be internal to adjust some of the things that you're doing. But I think when we're playing, as you say, Howard, there, if you can get external and you can get a little bit more into what you want the golf ball to do. The putting book that we wrote years ago, Gary Nicol and myself, we kind of based it on a couple of questions, which was, one was, is it possible to hold this putt? Which, that's a great question in the sense that no matter what's happened before, if you've had a dreadful day on the greens and you've got a putt on 15 from 12 feet, is it possible you could hold that putt? Well, the answer is yes, unless you make up a story that it's not your day or whatever. And then the second question was, what does this ball have to do to go in the hole? And that question gets you external, because your brain is solving the puzzle of, what does the ball need to do? Well, it needs to track this direction and it needs to enter the hole there. And I know we've talked about this many times. I don't think we give our body enough credit for the genius that resides within it. We're a product of a few billion years of evolution, and part of that evolution was moving objects to targets to survive. We're pretty good at that. But then we have this endless desire to intellectualize the whole damn thing. And there's a lot of money involved in the intellectualization of this game. And, I'm not throwing any rocks here, but all that intellectualization, I think it's very important for a coach to know that stuff. But something that, I heard years ago, are you smart enough to keep it simple when you deliver it to people?
That's great. Yeah.
I think that's where so much of us, including me, absolutely me, I coach this game like you do. Howard also coaches, but I find myself falling back into old behaviors of, I got to solve this. I got to fix this. It's through something. I mean, I've been playing this game, 4 decades or more, and I still fall into it. And it's from that lack of trust that we got this. Like we wouldn't be here if hundreds of thousands of years ago we couldn't throw a rock or a spear at something.
Yeah. If you just, I mean, this is something that, Marcus Bell, who I know you've had on the show and Howard spent some time with, and I think talks about, a lot of good stuff there with what Marcus talked about movement. But if you just get a kettlebell in your hands and you stand there and you get yourself in a golf posture and you get yourself in balance and you imagine that you're going to kind of make an underarm throwing motion with the kettlebell, nobody does that inefficiently. Nobody does that inefficiently. Everybody does that efficiently because it's kind of like wired into us. And Fred's second mention, Fred's club throwing exercise. Again, you see people throwing golf clubs and the move, and all of a sudden they've got pressure shift and lag in the downswing and all this kind of stuff. So I just think exploring more of what's inherently there in terms of efficient movements that's kind of wired into us to a degree. I think there's much more stuff to be explored there. And yes, use technology to then say, well, when you are focusing on this, look at how your pressure is shifting better and look at how this is responded as a result of what you're focusing on. Not starting with, Tim, your pressure's doing this and you should be doing that, and all this intellectualization of it all, which just completely, bollocks is the system up, basically.
Yeah. So part of the thing you talk about in your book, you say a nice little phrase, work on the whole. Like it's not, as you said, work on some dynamic of like, where's your weight here, where's your there, because we all have natural timing. Like you talked about when we, throws, like I'll often play catch with a client on the range.
Yeah.
And they get it to me every time. I'll put my hand here, they'll hit it, put it down here, they'll get it. And it's all natural timing. But when you're focused on minutia of what you're doing with your right elbow, turning your left hip, you disrupt that natural timing.
Yeah. And we're also great problem solvers. I've been fascinated for years with something that still baffles scientists. And that's anybody who's had kids will have seen this of how the hell do we learn to walk? Learning to walk is an unbelievably complex thing that still isn't fully explained. But essentially, when a baby learns to walk, they learn to walk because of the relationship to error, in the sense that error isn't seen as something to avoid or resist. Obviously, they're not conscious of all this as being a baby, but it's error to the left, error to the right, error falling forwards, error falling backwards, and eventually organizing around that. And again, I think I look back at my playing days and I spent 25 years, and the only thing that I did on every single swing that I made when I was trying to play was do it right on every swing.
Yeah.
That was all I ever did.
Yeah,
Trying to do it right every time.
Hands up, guilty.
Yeah. And by the way, just a quick heads up for those who are fans of Karl's. His new book is called Swing Like a Baby, and that'll be available on Amazon. I got to tell you, I've read probably the first half of the book, but again, I can't remember if this is in the book or something I picked up from you on the podcast. But it's something that I have shared with a lot of good players that I'll be talking to. And this happened, we were waiting in our rain delay yesterday. I brought you up again because I said I'm going to have a chance to talk to Karl tomorrow. And I said one of my favorite Karl things this year has been the idea of separating shots into three categories. Good, good enough, and poor. And it instantly resonates. And I brought it up on the podcast several times. I think it resonates with golfers for a variety of reasons, but maybe you could explain in your words why that's so, I don't know, freeing for for players.
It's funny that, Howard, you mentioned that. I think in the last couple of years of anything that seems to have landed with folk, it's the idea of the ones, twos, and threes. And I don't know if I mentioned it last time we did. I'll have to send you it if you've not seen it. I did a YouTube thing with a guy called Matt Fryer, who's got a big following. And we did it at Formby Ladies Golf Club, which is a beautiful golf course in the northwest of England. It's a stunning golf course. And the video looks like a setup, but it actually isn't. Where he said, what we'll do, he said, just do a little bit of coaching the first couple of holes. And he's a bit of a reputation as a moaner, and he's always sort of knocking himself. And he played absolutely crap the first 3 holes. I mean, right on cue, he's hitting it all over the place. We did a bit of coaching on the third, and the coaching was the idea of the 1s, 2s, and 3s, about the idea of explaining to yourself that every round of golf you play, there's going to be 1s, good shots, good enough, and then poor shots. And then he gets on the 5th hole there at Formula. It's one of the most beautiful par 3s anywhere in the world. And he stands there and just knocks it straight in the hole. And it's like a hole in one. Yeah, and it's just like, it looks like the biggest setup ever. I mean, you can see it on YouTube. But anyway, why does it work? I can only relate it to my experience. Again, when I played, I look back, and the 20 odd years, every single round that I played, this was going to be the round. This was going to be the round where I didn't have to face the feelings that bad shots gave me.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I did, really looking back on it, was built around that premise that if I just heard the right information, I just did the right drill, hit enough balls, this was going to be the round where I didn't have to face that. And the reality of it is, and I get people to do an exercise with this, if you write down 1, 2, and 3, so 1 is good shots, 2 is good enough, 3 is poor shots. And I'll say to people, right, I want you to go on a bit of a flight of imagination. And I want you to write down, if you played the best golf of your life tomorrow, and you just had lights out, you just went crazy on the golf course, and it was just the best you could play, what score would you do? So everybody puts the score down. So if you normally shoot 80, you'd perhaps plus 73 or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And then I say, okay, you've played the best golf of your entire life tomorrow. Being honest, even if you played the best golf, realistically, how many bad shots will you still hit in that round? How many 3s will you have? And everybody, and literally everybody, they'll say, well, it's going to still be 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 or whatever.
Absolutely.
So what this does, by doing this exercise before you play, of giving yourself some 3s before you play, you actually then start to deal with the reality of the game rather than deny the reality of the game. I denied the reality of the game for 20 odd.
Well, if I may just interject briefly, like I've said this on the show for 10 years, that golfers have this idea, like human beings do, that today's the day, nothing bad will happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I live in a big city, and people have this idea that today's the day that traffic won't be a problem, that people won't piss them off, that somebody's not going to cut them off. And yet every day it happens. And the end of this, and this is a Sam Harris thing, we all deal with it. You know, one of the reasons I love that so much, and I've really, I know we probably talked about it, but I've applied it to my game, especially the amount of tournament play I do. I mean, I really play almost zero casual golf. I mean, I play almost every round where I have to hand a card in. And sometimes that's embarrassing, and you deal with it. And sometimes it's good, and you deal with it. And I know, it's 28 minutes, and I'm now going to talk about my own game. Listen, I gave you 20.
That is a record. That is a record.
I gave you 28 minutes of promo. At least give me a couple minutes. Because Carl always gives me crap about this. And I'm like, yeah, dude, all we talk about is you. Anyway, this week alone,
It's your favorite subject.
Yeah, this week alone, I played 3 different tournament rounds. I had scores of 70, 74, and 76. And in all of those rounds, I had some great shots. Lots, had a lot of 1s in that 70. Lots of 2s and the odd 3s. But the thing is, knowing and thinking about it that way, I think allows me and I think other people to just remind yourself that you can deal with it, no matter what happens. The difference in ball striking I had from Wednesday to Thursday was ridiculous. I was just puring it Wednesday. I was hitting it terrible yesterday. But yesterday I got a couple good breaks, hit some trees. They bounced into the fairway instead of OB. And I literally hit the same amount of greens with my shitty ball striking, or so I thought, as I did with my good ball striking. It just because of the idea that come what may, I'm going to be able to handle it. And I think that's why it's such a great reminder that we're all going to experience those vagaries in every game we play.
And I think there's so many layers you can go to with the 1, 2s, and 3s, Howard. That I think for good players like you, I've sort of had a lot of conversations recently about the 2s, in the sense that the 2s would be good enough shots, and I think good players have a terrible relationship with 2s. The number of times I've spoken to quality players, and how do you react when you hit it? Oh, I can't. I hate it when I get it off the toe, or I get it a bit thin, or whatever. And it's like, well, what's more important? Is it more important to bitch and moan about your 2s, or get out there and earn a load of money? Because you can be really, really good at this game with a lot of 2s in a round of golf.
Yeah.
That you thinned it a little bit, but it's on the green, or you turned it over a little bit too much, but it's found the back edge of the green, or you've hit it out the heel. It was an horrible shot, really, but it's on the golf course. It's on the fairway. And I think when you pre-plan that, and then the other side of it for better players is having a better relationship with the 1s as well, because good players get to a point where 1s are actually only 2s, in the sense that that's what I should do. When I hit a good shot, that's what I'm capable of. That's what I should, rather than. Kent's got a great line on this, hasn't he, where he talks about finger beauty and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That, for Christ's sake, if you hit a good shot, enjoy it and acknowledge it, and get something from it.
I was going to say, I played with Kent. We're talking about Ken Osborne, a good friend of ours. I played with him last Friday, and we were just having a fun game with each other. That was a social round. We actually played a game of worst ball against each other. But he does that. And as soon as you hit a good shot, he goes, thing of beauty, whether you do it or he does it. And as you said, Karl, because even for any player to acknowledge that you've hit a good shot, it is empowering.
Well, that was one of the reasons that Tiger Woods initially was not welcomed by PGA Tour players, because when he would hit a great shot or make a sink a putt at a key moment, he would fist pump and celebrate. And that went against kind of like
twirl the club.
Yeah, exactly. That went against the male culture of, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. Kind of like there was a hockey player here years ago, Karl, and Frank Mahovlich, and he would score a goal and he just wouldn't do much. But it's good to celebrate these things, because as I picked up from one of your DVDs about 1,000 years ago, is that we remember things that we get emotional about.
Exactly.
So let's celebrate the good things. Yes, bad things happen, but then let them go. But just coming back to something that you and I have talked about sometimes, is that in this kind of performance area of coaching, sometimes there's a tendency to almost get into tips and tricks, like in golf swing coaching. But one of the things I love what you suggested in your book, and I've heard you talk about it before, is the idea of the Super Six. Mm-hmm. And why I like that is that idea of, well, I'll let you explain it. The whole idea of start again. Explain Super Six and why it's so advantageous.
I mean, teeing Super Six up, the sort of classic experience most of us have had who play golf. And your classic 10 handicapper will have had these experiences where, you play 9 holes off 10 handicap. And then we go through that really useful exercise after 9 holes where we stand there and add each other's score up.
Not useful.
Exactly. And Fred says to Jim, he said, Jim, do you realize you've only dropped 1 shot? And all of a sudden then he's trying to protect something on the back 9 and hang on, and he collapses. We've all had the reverse of that, where we play dreadful on the front 9 and then there's just some kind of reset and we play great on the back 9 and shoot lights out. Our brain definitely loves the idea of a fresh start or a new beginning. Why do we create New Year's resolutions on the 1st of January? Because it's a beginning, it's a new start. But years ago I thought, why the hell do we wait 9 holes to start again? It doesn't make any sense. So when you play Super Six, instead of seeing the game as being 18 holes made up of 2 sets of 9, you see the golf course as being 6 sets of 3. And you've got 6 separate games that you play. Your first game is the first 3 holes. Whatever you do on that, good, bad, or indifferent, you reset and you start again. And it's a new game to play. How many times do you see football games change from one half to another. You know, you see in the World Cup at the moment, it's almost universal, this idea of resetting. But the beauty of golf is, and I've been delving more and more into this I've been spoken a lot with Chris Neibauer, who's, you should have him on his show. He's a great, great guy. I mean, brilliant, brilliant books that he's written. And he talks about the fact that, you know, relating it to golf, when we go out on a golf course, the objective reality is that we are in a big field with pieces of rubber, hitting those pieces of rubber with implements. That's the objective reality. What we decide it means and what we decide it is it's just a story. Now, it's a collective story that we all buy into, that 18 holes, golf is 18 holes made up of 2 sets of 9. But Chris's point is, if what you've made up about reality doesn't suit you, make up something else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you keep collapsing, you know, from one 9 to another, or, you know, you reset from one 9 to another, and it helps you, make up something else. Make up the idea that golf is 6 sets of 3. There was a guy, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but it was one of the hilarious experiences of the last 30 years. We're doing a clinic at Wentworth, and we was talking about this front 9, back 9 scenario. And the guys around the table, there's about 6 of these guys around the table. You can imagine at Wentworth, they've all done fairly well for themselves. And they all start laughing, and they say, "What about Barry?" And I said, "What do you mean about Barry?" And this guy sat around the table who'd been is a really successful businessman. His nickname at the golf club was Back 9 Barry.
That's great.
And to such a degree, and I've got the picture somewhere, on his golf bag, he actually got on the bag printed Back 9 Barry. I've actually, funnily enough, I've actually got it here because I keep it handy. That this is one of his golf balls.
That's hilarious.
And he's got Back 9 Barry, and he said it's every single time. He said, I play the front 9 really crap. I turn on the back 9 and I shoot lights out around the West Coast at Wentworth, playing the back 9. And he said, I realise now what a story this has become, what an identity it's become. And you know, it was funny. I mean, we did suggest to him he should join a 9-hole course and see how that was.
That's great.
That is really funny.
You know, Karl, in tournament play, as competitors, we keep the other person's scorecard. So again, I think it was on one of your shows, and I know you probably brought that Super 6 up on this show before, but I relearned it on the show a few months ago. So I'm keeping somebody else's scorecard, but I'm also, you have to keep your own scorecard, your own score above it. And I have a little tick mark after every 3 holes. He's like, "What is this?" I said, "Don't worry about it." Because I literally do that. I literally on my card put a line, and it's a physical thing to remind me that hole 4 isn't the 4th hole. It's the start of this next set of 3.
It's a new game.
And no matter what I've done, good or bad, I go, okay, what can I do now on 4, 5, and 6? And then I put a big line in there. I go, that's done. What can I do now? And I think as a tournament player, it really does remind me that that's done. I don't have to worry about the 15th. That's, you know, a hole I don't like, because that's not in this set right now. Yeah. Speaking of that, in the book, you talk about tension. There's a chapter heading how the fear of loss could be damaging your score. The one I was looking, how to deal with tension. What is it about? And again, there's a lot of people listening. It's club championship season, and maybe some people listening, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, might be playing the first tournament, maybe the only tournament they play. What is it about nerves that makes it harder for golfers to play? Is it because we worry about what will show up, what may show up?
I think if you look at what tension is that, you know, basically our brain, fundamentally, when you go and play golf, our brain really couldn't give a crap whether you play a good golf or bad golf. Our brain at a really deep level is still only primarily concerned with one thing, and one thing alone, which is survival. So, and within that amazing capacity that we've had to survive, one of the things that we had to do to survive when we roamed around in caves is to be part of a group. That if we were ostracized from the group for doing something we shouldn't with a caveman or a cavewoman or whatever it may have been that we'd transgressed. If we were ostracized from a group, it meant one thing, and that was death. Now, and this might sound a crazy stretch, but we're still all going through that because we're now part of another group. We are part of the group called golfers, and we go and play golf, and we perceive the environment as being, how will I be reflected in the group's eyes? And so the golf course then becomes this perception of threat. And if I'm perceiving threat, then there's going to be a physiological response to that: fight, flight, and freeze. Now, were those three things really good for survival? Absolutely, they've kept us here. We should bow down and pray to, genetics and evolution, but they're not that useful for golf. But what we can start to see with this, and I think this is maybe the biggest one of all for us. We've alluded to it today, is if we see the quest as being to get the brain's perception, and that's the key word, to reduce the perception of threat when we go and play golf, and we see the golf course more as an opportunity than a threat. Now, we're not going to get there instantly, but a big part of it is actually constantly saying to your brain, whatever happens today, I'm going to be okay. Mm-hmm. I'm actually going to survive this. I'll be pissed off if I shoot 94 or whatever. I'm going to be fed up if I 3-putt. That's different from actually your primeval brain thinking that you're going to be ostracized from the group if you shoot 82. And that's what's going on. It sounds crazy to say it, but I think unless we understand the deeper roots of, Raymond's work with Golf Beneath the Surface, the contribution from people like him that get us to understand what the brain is really up to, that it becomes more than just the surface stuff of, breathe a bit better.
Well, one of the things you've referenced, you referenced this recently, and I'll just jump in, because I've had occasion to talk to Ray. He's been on the show. I've read his book. That the idea of confidence being a stable element versus an unstable issue for most golfers, and the instability comes from this perception that I might be ostracized. But where does stable confidence come from?
I think stable confidence coming. I spent a lot of time with Raymond. We actually put a program together, and I don't think stable confidence does not come from good scores previously. It doesn't come from hitting it well that day. It doesn't come from lessons. All of those things are nice, and all of those things are a good contribution. Stable confidence comes from a willingness to accept the variety of outcomes, which I think that's why the 1, 2s, and 3s resonate with people, Howard, because at some level they're probably, by osmosis or whatever, get into the root of what really is going on. Why do we take golf lessons really? We take what's driving us to have golf lessons. It's a fear of shitty shots. That's the big driver of golf lessons. Well, that doesn't mean to say don't take golf lessons, because the positive way of taking golf lessons is to try and improve. But really, for most people, the driver isn't improvement. It's the desire to avoid really poor shots. When we actually start to make peace with that, with the 1s, 2s, and 3s, we're really actually speaking to this primeval brain and saying, look, fella, I know you're looking out for me here, but I'm going to be okay.
Well, one of the things that I love about your book is that you talk about the 3 key elements, and you've alluded to them in some ways without actually naming them, except we talked about intention earlier, but attention and attitude. So I would say the acceptance is part of the attitude, but let's talk about attention for a moment, because I think that's where we really struggle in all parts of our lives is basically we don't know what's happening. We're caught up in kind of like this train of thought or feelings or our habitual patterns. It's like a train that leaves the station and we're on it and it's just roaring through the countryside, but we don't know it. Why? Because we're not paying attention to what's going on. So that's my little bit on that. Particularly to me, it's about what am I paying attention, particularly in terms of what am I feeling in my body. So what's your take on why attention is so valuable to a golfer?
Yeah, I think if you said attention, Tim, awareness, perhaps another word for it. I think, again, I've got much more clear on this over the last few years. The actual act of observation is so powerful that if you can play golf There was a guy, a philosopher, a guy called Sydney Banks. I don't know if you've heard the name. And if
You've talked about him a few times on your show. Those were fascinating podcasts.
yeah, and if you look at his work, I mean, this guy was a Scottish welder who he actually came to Canada and worked as a welder, and then had an enlightenment experience. And if you listen to his videos, even the guys who follow all his stuff say, you listen to the videos of him and you think, what the hell is that all about? What is he talking about there? But actually, one thing that Sydney Banks said, that I've got it plastered up somewhere. He said, if only people would stop resisting their experience, that alone would change the world. And I read that for the first time and I thought, what? And the more I've looked at that, and I think, when we go on the golf course, rather than, oh, I hate feeling like this. I get a number of young players, I hate feeling such and such a thing, and I hate these thoughts that come into my head, and all this stuff that we're resisting our experience. When you can get a little bit better at just observing the fact that you feel an energy in your body, you can feel certain sensations in your body. You observe that this train of thought, this endless passage of thoughts is coming through the screen of your mind. By observing it, you actually allow it to do what it's designed to do, which is just pass through. If you look at the word emotion, energy in motion, that when we go, oh, I've got first tee nerves, and it's a bad thing, when we resist something, we actually strengthen it. Whereas actually, if you can observe it and just see it as energy in your body, and be curious about it. I know it sounds a bit woo-woo this, but actually it's just a different way of actually looking at the game, and a different way of being, by observing rather than trying to fix.
Yeah, well, I could say one of the things that you've talked about in your book is let's make this simpler. And one of the things that we can do is just to notice what's happening. That's the first start. It's just notice. But most of the time we're caught up in our head. I'm going to do this today with my backswing, and I'm going to finish this way, et cetera, et cetera. But the art of just paying attention is a game changer.
See, I was with a guy the other day, and for him, rhythm and tempo is a big thing in his game. Everybody finds their own cues that work well, but for him, rhythm and tempo is a good one. And I said, how do you find your tempo? And he looked at me and he said, well, let's do this exercise. You guys will have heard this before, but it's a really useful one. I said, let's go on the range. And we went on the range. And I said, right, if we have a scale from 1 to 10, 1 is a tempo that's so ridiculously slow that you're just going to knock it a few yards. And 10 is a swing so fast that if you blink, you're going to miss it. And if you're still in balance, you've done it wrong. So I had him doing a couple of 1s and 2s, really slow movements, just tapping it down the range. Then some crazy 9s and 10s, falling off his feet, trying to hit it so hard. And I said, okay, let's hit 10 balls now. And I said, I don't want you to try and do anything. I said, I just want you to observe what comes out. And the first one, oh, that was an 8. Oh, that was a 4. And all of a sudden, oh, that was a 6. That was a 6. That was a 6. That was a 6. And all of a sudden, his system had organized around just observing what was actually happening, not trying to make it happen. His brain had got parameters to work within. He knew what 1 felt like. He knew what 10 felt like. And as a result of observation, his system settled around 5 or 6. And I think things like that, rather than me saying, it's far more valuable to do that than me saying, look, Fred, you need to swing it a bit smoother. Your transition needs to be better. You need to put some pressure in the lead foot on the downswing.
His own experience.
His own experience.
Well, and you say that all the time. I think the phrase "research your own experience" is another Carlism that we've brought up a time or two. And quickly back to what you said about resistance. That famous saying, "What you resist persists." Let's wrap things up, Karl, just by talking about the Mind Caddie book. It's on Amazon. You mentioned on a recent show that it was number 1 on Amazon for, I was actually saying it like you, Amazon. So it's number 1 for this type of information, and it really is. It's all bite-sized. As I said, it's a compendium of many, many years of experience, and a man that's been around the game. I recommend, honestly, it took a long time for me to get into the Mind Caddie app, but I use it all the time now, and I really, really like it. Your podcast is on point, but let's talk about what people will find in the Mind Caddie book, how you've organized it.
We kind of jokingly said, Howard, that it's the book for people who don't read books.
Exactly.
In the sense that I've noticed this recently. Maybe it's just I'm getting old. That I've always read a lot, but more recently I find I'll read a passage in a book at night and then think, what the hell have I just read? And I've got to read it again.
You got to read it in the morning, Carl. Got to read it in the morning.
As I say, it might just be early onset or whatever. But the book, it's basically 46 lessons or 46 experiences I've had with players over the years, different people. And if you want to read it from start to finish, you can, but you can literally just jump in at chapter 22 or 46 or whatever, and just, that's the hope, really. It's the kind of book that you may not read all in one go, but you can just jump in there and find things useful.
Carl, you talk in your book about curiosity being a core attribute one should take into golf. I'm curious about your experience with Paul McGinley. I invite you to be brief on it, but I find him a fascinating character. I mean, he sunk, I think, the winning putt against Jim Furyk in a Ryder Cup years ago. Fred Shoemaker talks about an amazing story that he kind of blanked out, and then next thing you know, he's running around. But I find him a fascinating guy on the Golf Channel. Him and Chambly are an amazing duo. What was your experience with McGinley in terms of working with him, and just what stands out?
I mean, it stands out. He was, as you say to him, he was a deep thinker about the game. I mean, he told me that story about the winning putt in the Ryder Cup, and how, a bit like it kind of ties in with what we talked about. Really, he said he was walking up to the green, and he said for a moment he started to think, I've got a putt here to win the Ryder Cup. And he said that was just too big. That was just too big a deal. His brain couldn't deal with that. It was just, I mean, understandably. And he said he saw the putt, and he said he instantly saw a spot that he wanted to roll the ball over. And his caddy JP at the time came over and said, Paul, I think, and he was just about to start to say, I think you should hit it outside right. And McGinley said, go away. He said, I've got the putt. And then he said he stood over it, and he felt like he needed to hit it over this spot, but he also felt like he hooked the putt into the hole. And he said immediately when he hit the putt and he saw it go over the spot, he knew it was going to go in, and that's why he started to jump up in there. And he said, I felt like I was up in the air way before anybody else had recognised it. But I just thought that was a great example of somebody in the ultimate white heat moment, and it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. He found a way of focusing on the task rather than what the task meant. And I think if somebody can do that in the Ryder Cup, we could probably get a little bit better at it in the club championship.
Yeah. That's huge. That's absolutely huge.
Yeah.
As always, Dr. Karl Morris, great conversation. And as I said several times now, your podcast, I've listened to many episodes of the Sydney Banks in the winter. Who was actually, remind me, who was the guy, the acolyte of Sydney Banks?
It was Dick and Bettinger, who talks about the...
Yes.
Yeah.
Because after listening to that episode, I went and watched some videos with Sydney Banks himself. What a fascinating,
yeah.
The
no thought state. Yeah,
he's like a mystic.
Wild. Yeah, very mystic. Listen, and the new book is called Mind Caddie. That's the app. That's the podcast. And as always, great catching up with you. Sorry we won't see you in person this summer, but we'd love to. Anytime you're in the area, we'd like to hang out.
We've got it planned for next year, so it'll have to be, and we now have a biannual meeting.
Well, that would be great.
There you go.
An annual meeting.
I think we're just going to wrap it up. I don't have any, I don't have any other tournament stories. Karl, thanks very much. How do people, if they want to get a hold of you, what are they? What's your website again?
Yeah, obviously the book's on Amazon, but the website is the mindfactor.com, and the app is at the App Store. Just search for Mind Caddie and you'll get it there. Thanks.
Just congrats. And congrats, Mark, Karl. It's great stuff. The book is great. I've been
congratulations, Karl Marx.
Yeah, it sounds like a Monty Python episode. Yeah, I've been digging your stuff for 2 decades, and I see how there's some stuff that I read 20 years ago, but you've expanded it and you freshened it up. So it's great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
Carl, don't go away just for a second. I want to say hi after Tim. Tim O'Connor, o'connorgolf.ca. The Humble and Fred Show produces this program. Nicholas, tell everyone how they can follow us and where they can get a hold of this show.
Yes, on Instagram and Twitter, it'll be swing_thoughts_podcast. Our YouTube is Swing Thoughts 1. And our brand new TikTok, Swing Thoughts 4. You'll find a bunch of clips from our latest episode every week.
You're doing a great job, kid. And
Absolutely.
we're taking a little hiatus here for the next couple of weeks. There's some holidays and some tournament play. We will be back very shortly. And thanks, everyone, for listening.
All right, you guys are going to have some alone time. Oh, I need to stop this. There we go.
Well, that was great, Carl. Thanks very much. Yeah, like